There it is. Hi, welcome to the Modern Dad Council. My name's Chris Eishen, and we have with us today Eric Lehman from Game Changers, Jay Forty from the Greatness Zone, and Thomas Pfeiffer from the Good Men Project. So welcome today, gentlemen. And what kind of brings up today's topic is I had my article ran in my local paper promoting this show and the Kick-Ass Dad show, and I got a call from the large news station out of Detroit, Channel 4. It's Guy Gordon. Anyway, it's kind of a big thing for this local area, you know, for the Detroit area. It goes through probably half the state of Michigan. But he says, okay, I'd love to do a show about you and what you're doing, but, you know, I don't really get how, why you matter. Like, it's not quite resonating to me of why people would watch a show on what you're doing. So could you help me to understand that? And so that kind of got me thinking. I'm like, well, what do you mean? We're doing so many good things with this show. And then, so one of the things he was talking about was what kind of interaction do we help create for men out there? And at this point, the Modern Day Council hasn't quite done a lot of that creation of interaction with the dads out there, but that's something we're developing, right? So as this show, this show kind of started with this idea that I had, like, wouldn't it be cool if there's just a whole bunch of us out here that are passionate about parenting and passionate about being dads and all that. Wouldn't it be neat if we had a show where we could all just kind of talk about the different issues that we have? And then this show was born, and it's been freaking super powerful and just done a lot for me personally. And I know from the emails I get from you guys, you feel the same way. So what kind of change is this? Are we trying to make in the world? What does anybody want to put their hand up to go first to kind of answer some of these questions, like why is the Modern Dad Council important, and what does it provide for the world?
Yeah,
go ahead, Thomas. All you, brother. Go.
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. The first is that traditionally there have not been a lot of resources for men on, let's call it, emotional self-improvement. If you want to do bodybuilding or woodworking or learn a craft or something like that, you can go and you can find a book or a course or something like that. But there hasn't been a lot on how to be a better dad, on how to be more present in the world for your kids. A lot of the self-help is really more geared towards women. And that's not to say that there shouldn't be a lot of stuff for women or that it's a zero-sum game, but there needs to be more for men. So one of the great things about the Modern Dad Council is that we are offering thoughts, advice, best practices, discoveries, ideas on how, as men, we can be better people and better parents for our kids. And the second thing is just that it's hard, and it's one thing to read about it in a book from somebody who has a formula or wants to sell you a formula, and it's quite another thing to listen to real fathers being open and honest about these really difficult challenges that we face as parents, and how we're doing our best and we're not always doing it right. But I think to give people a window into what's really happening, as opposed to something that's distilled into a book, is really vital.
Yeah. I think one of the things that kind of stuck out from with what you were saying was the difference that we're making in society isn't necessarily anecdotal. Like, we're not saying that if you do this, it's going to make you the greatest parent in the world. but it's saying, well, from my experience, I did this, this, and this, and this happened, and I did this, this, and this, and then this happened. So take it for what you will. So to one of his questions, this news anchor guy, Gordon, asked me, he's like, well, what makes you the professional in this area? Why I don't have a doctorate's degree. I'm not a psychologist or a social worker or any of those things. So what qualifies me to stand on my soapbox, basically? So Jay?
Yeah, I love that one. And I'll add a little bit to what Tom said too. Why you get to stand on your soapbox is that you get to live this every day. And I find that there are people who have professional degrees in things and who are big from an academic environment, but that doesn't always mean it's meaningful or practical. And so I don't know that a degree is the way to gather some meaningful information in this. I think, like a lot of things, experiential or experiences are what really craft our awareness about what is and what works. And so to have people interested to look under the layers and to then challenge it, I think that's what we do. We're aware enough to look at what dads are in today's world and then to challenge some of the stereotypes that say it has to look like this because Jungian theory has this or Maslow says it's this. Well, maybe. But those of us who live it every day get to come to the forum and share some things that when we took the time to understand it, here's what we saw. So to me, one of the biggest values of what a modern dad council is in the word modern, that we're saying, what does it take to show up as your biggest, best, and most authentic self in a world that would prefer that you don't do that? So if we could, how might we affect change in the family and within ourselves, that we are able, to look through what's out there and show up differently to the situations. And so to me, the big conversation is what's the difference between conventional and modern dads, and that the underlying work of that is, like Thomas said, that we're trying to create resources in this bigger emotional self-awareness of who we are, because it's our formula for showing up big to our life. And many times that stuff for a man, for a dad, was not allowed to be part of the conversation. So this isn't a group hug event. This is an awareness event. And the awareness allows you to look at the world, look at yourself, and say, how do I show up as my biggest and best self? How do I build my life around what I do best? And how do I guide the people in my family to be on that same mission? And that's what I think our biggest value is navigating the road, trying to put in some guideposts or some guardrails on where a modern dad's road might be, because it looks really different than the roads dads used to be on.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really interesting about what you just said, what brought to mind for me, it got me thinking about when I started down this road, right? So was it about a year and a half ago, November, at Planet Hollywood in Orlando.
I remember.
We're all meeting, me, you, Michael Manaluni, and everybody, and I'm introduced to the Greatness Zone process, or the Life Possibilities course. It's that section where you're trying to find your greatness zone, your best fit in the world. It's like, for me, it's like, wow, okay, this is how I operate best. This is how I can show up and become aware of the things that are going around me. And I start to apply that oxygen mask, on a daily basis, to start showing up and noticing and being more aware. And so that initially that started to change the things within my immediate family, right? So my relationship with my kids, my spouse or my ex, my girlfriend, and those close relationships. And then as time went on, I found that it affected everything else. It got to the point where I was going to work every day asking myself, why am I here? I hate this, because I know, now that I know what's possible and where I fit into the world, I know that it isn't here. So I'm showing up every day wasting time and wasting days and weeks and months of my life, and I've already wasted years and years and years So now it starts to create this whole new outlook for you, like as you develop and as you move and grow, to instead of just affecting those immediate relationships, but all areas of your life. So to your job, to your relationship with people that you meet, random strangers on the street, and everything else seem to be affected once you start to operate from that zone. Is that
Yep.
something that you found too, you guys as well, or is that just kind of like me being that 1%? Like it's like I know who I am. I'm gonna go out there and do it.
Tom, can I add one thing on that, just because he's trailing on some of the greatness zone stuff? You know, I think that the connection to the greatness zone as a way of looking at ourselves invites us to see who we truly are instead of who the world says we have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So your ability to have done some work on yourself in a way that was productive for you introduced you to you and your world in a different way. And I think part of the reason why I like this perspective coming at it from a dad standpoint is that it prepares you to be more clear and make better choices and be more courageous about living the way that you think you should, and instead of constantly being subjected to the rules around you that says it has to look like this. Its only purpose. In fact, it's funny when we do all the work with the kids, the Ready for Life and Life Possibilities and things like that with the greatness, and we say to them, conspicuously say to them, our job is never to tell you who or what to be. And I say the same thing here from the Modern Dad Council. No point are we ever telling you who or what you should be or how you should act as a dad. What we're trying to do is have conversations and share with you resources so you can figure it out for you. Because you should show up to those decisions. Not my words, but your words. And if we could be the voice that supports you in your process of discovering that and then giving you the courage to go and do it, then that's who I think we should be.
Oh, that just gave me goosebumps thinking about being that support group.
I think that,
you got a big one there. Go ahead.
yeah, I think that's great, Jay. And as you were saying that, I remember, my experience going to college where I first learned to question some of the ideas and principles and concepts and things that I had been brought up with. Just the assumptions that are loaded onto you as a kid. And so you're exposed to different ideas, and you really learn to think for yourself critically and make decisions that are based on what you believe and how you feel instead of what you were fed, and even what you were fed in high school, because for example a lot of the history that I learned in high school was proved either inaccurate or certainly way off compared to what I learned in college from real scholars. So it's kind of the same thing here. This is almost like a crash college seminar in that we can expose people to these different ideas, and you can think for yourself and you can say, well, wait a minute, I don't have to follow that model that I was shown as a kid, because that model didn't work for me. It didn't serve me. I didn't have such a great childhood, or I don't want to visit those things on my kids. So how do I get out of that model? How can I have some conscious intervention here and adopt a different mode or a set of different modes, assemble a set of different modes from a variety of places that work for me and my family?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so Jay, did you want to add to that?
I mean, I always have a comment, but I think that the biggest thing about that is that the more that we just open and engage people in conversation in a meaningful, supportive, optimistic, positive way, that positive and great things come out of it. So, no point in here, as I've noticed the tone of our conversations, it's never what's wrong with things. It's always how do we look at things in new and productive ways and stay optimistic about where we go and what we talk about. I mean, I like the link, and we talk about this at the Greatness Zone all the time. The cool thing about it is that we hang on the word greatness. If can we hold ourselves to a higher standard? And is one of those standards as a modern dad that we show up true to who we are, proud of who we are, and wise enough in order to work on the things that don't make us our best. And could we be open to that? And if we were open to that all the time, could the us that shows up on the other side of it be just incrementally better every day. We don't need to change it all overnight, but this is the ongoing conversation. Join us every week, and as we do talk about things little by little, we can affect some change, and it doesn't have to happen to a point where you feel funny or weird, because it's gradual, and you do the pieces that are right for you.
Right. You work at it at your own pace, kind of a situation. Yeah. So Eric, what we're talking about, since I know you're having some technical difficulties, and that's okay, but I'd like to get your kind of thoughts on everything. Is the question's kind of like, why the Modern Dad Council? What is it that we're doing, or why is it impacting the world in a positive way? You know, what is it that makes us the experts?
We know how you love that word.
Well, I mean, I love it. It's just like I love messing with it, and I feel like much like greatness is all subjective. What does it mean to be, an expert in our own world? I mean, just because one of our ideas works really well for me, doesn't mean it's going to make you go home and be the expert, and I feel like that's where it's important to know our strengths, but also know that like we're not like the cure-all for everything father, and that but what I feel we do great at, and where I feel we are in our greatness zone, is we are holding the space for the greatness of fatherhood as a role. Yes. And we are letting people know that we're recommitting ourselves to investigating our roles as fathers, and we are, I'm learning just as much as I'm sharing. I mean, so like I don't feel as though I corner the market on greatness in any aspect of fatherhood, except for the fact that I love the enhancements that's happening in my own family unit, with my kids. And if there's anything I can share about, whether it was dancing in a hip hop recital, or any other story, if those stories warm your heart and let you know that you're not alone, then I've done my job for the day, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what experience is what makes us not the experience, but the experience, and then to be able to come on here and share that wisdom, right? So that the tagline kind of for the Modern Dad Council is "Dad wisdom worth sharing." So what we have to say is worth listening to if you just give it a minute. Right?
Well, and it's worth being a part of. Like we are, it's a council. It's not just a bunch of experts. I mean, and maybe that's what the true definition of a council is. I don't know, but I feel like we're a very welcoming and accepting bunch. Like you just have to care about being a father to know that your opinion and your experiences are valid.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that's the criterion, or the I don't know, whatever it means to enter the council, the pledging of the council.
Secret handshake.
Well, yeah, it's not that any person that wants to be a part of the council can just jump on and be part of the council. You can't. We're not just. We have a Dads on the Street segment because they're just dads on the street, like, right? So to be part of this council, you have to have some reason to be a part of it. We're not just a bunch of. I mean, we are in a sense. We're just modern dads, but we are all experts in some type of field, right? So Thomas being the editor at the Good Men Project. You graduated from where with what degree?
Yale with a degree in English.
Right. I think like that's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah, and I graduated from divorce with a degree in dysfunctional relationships.
And I got that degree too.
Yeah, you got a PhD in that one.
But the other thing that just came to mind for me in terms of sort of the relationship between us and our audience. You know, we're not selling anything. We're not a magazine offering advice that is sort of geared to our advertisers wanting to sell people particular products. You know, we don't have a book. We may at some point have a book, but we're really giving this from our hearts and trying to open a dialogue, a liberating dialogue with men and other fathers. So it's sort of agenda-less in that way, which I think makes it a little bit more real.
I think Eric said it best when he said, you know, we've created the space for it. You know, sometimes things can't get heard if there's no space for them.
Right.
And so I think the biggest thing that we do is we carve out some time in our listeners' weeks and our personal weeks to come to this and to say that it's important enough that we should talk about it, and that we make no guarantee up front that we've got all the answers, and that the term expert is a word given to us that we didn't choose it. Somebody was asking us, you know, if we are, and we're experts in that we have some life advice that worked or didn't work in our own life, and we're open and willing to share it in this space that we create. And so can we make it non-confrontational, wise, caring, loving, and authentic? That would be a good way to use that space. And but I think the carve out at this time period lets us shine the light on some things that maybe, you know, we're staying in the dark, and that modern dad should come around with a flashlight and turn a whole lot more lights on. And in that, see things differently, and in the see things differently, decide, now that I have greater vision, what do I want to do next, and how does it make me better?
Right.
And I think the other point is, like, not better than any other dad out there, but better than the dad I was yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that's the most important part of what energetically feels so awesome about this. Is like there's no judgment in the room. You know, like we all can learn from our yesterday's fatherhood, you know, and I feel like that is the real opportunity, and that's why holding and creating the space is so pivotal. You know, we're in a time of transition. You know, I mean, the fathers that our fathers were are not as valid as we are right now, and we're in that recognition. We're understanding that a transition is happening, and our father's Oldsmobile is not the golden rule anymore. So and we're all making it up as we go along. So it's important to have other reference points.
Yeah, it's my thing is, I've always, you know, when you have kids, you're like, well, especially with my daughter, like the one thing when you look at girls and you see a girl that may be a little bit more easy to take home with you, you know, you're just like, oh, she must have daddy issues, or, you know, you go, as guys, we go to like a strip club or something for a bachelor party, you know, it's like, oh, I wonder how many people in here have daddy issues, you know. So much is like the value of a dad. We look at these people, especially women, I just say like strippers for an example, right? So,
Wow.
well, we say women strippers, oh, they have daddy issues. That's a very common association when you think strippers. Yet, if you look at some of the society, it's like they talk about how you have all these deadbeat dads and all this stuff, and that's what we're doing here, is that we're stepping up saying, we don't want our daughters to be strippers. We don't want our daughters ending up with this messed up life. How can we as dads not be these deadbeat loser dads and show up to the world and be awesome and impactful, that we, you know, more so than what we might be given credit for? I don't know. Maybe I went a little off.
Using that stripper thing.
Well, you know, I mean,
so focused on strippers.
I think I could, you know, speak to this because I have, you know, 3 kids who are in dance, right? And you know, of course, I did the hip hop recital with them one year. But I feel like, you know, the joke amongst a lot of fathers was that we send our kids to dance so that we can keep them off the pole. you know, and it was a very interesting, kind of commentary. And, I guess what I feel like this council is here to do is to come to acceptance, even if our kids decide that the poll is for them, and to not take ownership that as it was my fatherhood that sent my kid to the poll. So I mean, maybe this is the other, transition, that we're in, and we're brave enough to have the conversations. And Chris, I thank you for having that awkwardness and just talk about it, and I feel like this is a safe space for us to bring stuff like this up. And how great is it that we can, laugh about it during this hour, and also come to acceptance. I mean, what if my daughter decides to find a pole and that's her profession? I'm going to want to go to you guys with that and say, did I screw up, or is it just her choice? And do we,
do I have to go support her now in her new job, or what?
Right. Oh, God.
No.
Maybe
sorry,
we
I had to go left
else.
field.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think Eric brings up a point in that too. I mean, at what point do we pass the baton to our kids to own their lives? And that's also an issue for dads. That when the kids are not coming out as we would like them to be, is there an issue there? That just means they're not working on our roadmap. So is that right or is that wrong? So maybe it isn't either, but what change, what conversation could we have in this venue so that we become more aware that our job might be more custodial with our kids than creation? That it's up to us to make sure they show up as these exact, either replicas of us or in our definition of what success is. I know every time I'm at a classroom where I'm looking at kids, the biggest thing any of these college kids say to me is, my folks want me to be this and I so don't want to be that. And it's not one kid. It's 40, 50, 60% of the kids. They're I don't know why they think I should be an accountant. I just don't want to be. Well, maybe because you haven't told them what you do want to be. So they're trying to help you in that. But I think the conversation is yet one more thing that a modern dad could have. How do we talk about who you are and how you should show up to your life so that it doesn't look like mine if it shouldn't look like mine? And how could I be okay letting you go into the world to find your way, guided, supported? I think that's part of our responsibility, but not, it's, what do they call it? Detached involvement. This is your life. I'm completely detached from the outcome in that, and this may get a lot of ire, but it isn't my job to make sure you're happy and successful. That's your job. Mine is to guide you through to know how to do it. And then I pass the baton to you, and you run your own race. And I'm finding the more I'm accountable for my kids' decisions, the less I feel like I have any control of anybody's life. I should just manage my own and leave it at that.
Well, yeah, you touched on something really important, and this comes back to parents who are. When we were talking about this in a call I was just on with the Good Men Project, and we were talking about men in prisons and the disposability of men, and one of the people brought up how boys don't have enough activity, enough physical activity, and that our society sort of doesn't really embrace masculine expression, that we tend to be kind of afraid of it. And one of the things that's happening is that parents are extremely risk averse to anything that either might injure, not only that might injure their kids, but that might jeopardize their chance to get into whatever the school is, and the whole trajectory. And parents are also over managing these outcomes, and that's getting at what you were saying, is that a parent has a desired outcome for a child that the parent maybe thinks is the best thing for the child, but either you don't know whether that's really the best thing, or it's the best thing for you, but not necessarily for your kid. It's differentiating between best interest of the child and really your own self-interest. And what this makes me think is that a lot of parents measure their own worth in the world by who their kids are and what their kids do. My son the accountant, my son the doctor, my daughter the lawyer, or the this or the account, whatever. And so they want to be able to crow about that, to other people, and in a sense say, well, I'm better than you because your kid is a this and my kid is a that. And it's not a matter of somebody being better or worse. I mean, the best thing you can do as a parent is to create that space for your child to grow up to be who he or she really wants to be and is supposed to be. But a lot of parents don't see it that way. So I think to re-engineer that, giving the kids the freedom and the space to say, it's okay for me to live my own authentic life, for me to embrace that thing that I really want to do. And then those children grow up as parents who want to allow their children to do the same thing.
Well, it's a lot about teaching parents how to coach their kids, right?
Right.
So, like, that's kind of what we're talking about, is how do we as parents coach our kids? How do we, I can't tell you how many parents say, I wish that they'd just do this. If I tell them to do this, why don't they just do it? Why do they have to argue with me? Why do they got to do this? Why do they got to do that? Because that's who they are. My son, he's a teenager right now. He gets on my nerves all the time. I'll tell him to do something or answer a question, and he wants to argue with me. It's like, okay, how do I completely step out of the parent situation right now, put my coach shoes on, and step into this situation as a coach and not allow the parent in me to be irritated and pissed off right now because my kid's being a teenager.
Right.
So, I think you hit on a really good point, though, that we often measure ourselves or the value of ourselves based on what our kids are doing. So it's like, now I know that my son, he's probably a B, C student, but not because, it's mainly because he's lazy. He doesn't like to do his homework. So as his parent, I can get after him and yell at him for what he's not doing. But my thing is, it's like, these are your grades. You're gonna get what you choose to get. I can get all huffy puffy about it and come storming in and creating a fit. But at the end of the day, what does that solve? It doesn't do any good. All I'm gonna do is scare him into like scribbling his work a little faster or something. So what we do is we take a look at what he's doing and say, okay, what do you need to work on more, and allow him to tell me what he needs help with or how some of things could help him. So
I think I brought up the concept of the holiday letter last week, and I feel like so much of the old model of parenting is taking ownership for our kids' accomplishments and achievements and living vicariously through them, and I feel like a word that replaces some of the verbs that I used to use is like stewardship. I feel like what does it mean to steward these souls while they're with me. And I feel like there's honor in that word, and there's responsibility and accountability with that word stewardship, and yet there's no, like, I don't know, for me there's no charge of saying like, this kid is a mini me, so when he or she goes out into the universe, like, that is a representation of my parenting. It's just like, what happens on my watch? What happens during the time actively? What do my kids get to witness? How am I modeling the citizens that I wish them to become? And I feel like rather than like even like the Montessori teachable moment situation, but more like am I living a value-driven life, and am I modeling it? And are we reviewing our values and confirming that there's an alignment with my values and theirs? And I guess the great question that I don't know the answer to is, like, at what age, does it make sense to really initiate that dialogue? maybe it's just from birth, like when we figure things out. And I mean, 50 years ago it used to be like, Lehmans do this, and that's what Lehman, like, and it was also like, if you're Jewish, you do this, so
Right.
like I think there are way fewer assumptions that we can make based on our last names anymore. But that being said, where does the values-driven life begin, and how do we wrap ourselves around that conversation?
Mm.
I think a lot of this came out because our world is changing, and we've shifted out of what it's. I find that the economy drives how we're supposed to think. So if we've shifted out of a manufacturing environment where we're much more about pulling the levers and learning in a skill and experience way to today's world that requires greater self-awareness for you to figure out how to show up in your workplace, that for some reason the workplace, because it takes up so much of our time, gets to call some of the shots. And I think this is a serendipitous moment for dads and for all of us, because it's asking us to be more self-aware in order to figure out how we fit into our world better. So some of the things we used to carry and do just because we carried and did them, we now have to be wise enough to be aware enough that that's just not working. And to me, this whole Modern Dad Council is about helping dads see it differently. That
Right.
things around you can't change them if you're unaware that they've changed and you haven't.
You don't
And
know
I
what you
think-
don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, or you're not tuned in enough to know that it is happening. So, I think the biggest thing that awareness gives us is two big things as parents. One is that it is changed, and therefore our understanding of how we show up to it should be different. How we, like Chris was talking about, how do we, and Eric, how we steward our kids instead of parent our kids. And that doesn't mean we don't hold them accountable. We entirely hold them accountable. We just need to do it in a different way, and that ties in, Chris, what you were talking about in the coaching. How do we shift out of parenting into coaching, from telling into asking? And in the asking, it does hold the next generation accountable for thinking differently. Because when they weren't thinking differently, they were just responding to the orders we gave them. And now the world is changing so much that our orders are so quickly out of touch or are not even practical. We just keep carrying through the traditions. And people like me, maybe we're all like this, but I have a big ethnic family. And ethnicity brings stuff forward.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is what you do. So yeah, the Lehmans do this, but the 40s eat like this. And we celebrate Christmas like this, and this is what we do. And if somebody wants to do it different, everybody has a meltdown. Wait, stop. We all don't live in the same house anymore. This isn't a triple-decker, and the aunts and the uncles don't live in the 2 triple-deckers next to us anymore. It isn't like that. So based on that, what's different? And I think if we as dads could start our days by saying, when I went to bed last night, the world changed. What am I seeing today? And what's in my bag of tricks or my toolbox that will help me be my best and help my kids be their best, whatever that might look like. I think that level of awareness is the big thing that stops dads from being amazing, and I think stops most of us from being amazing. We're in such a rush to miss what's in front of us, to use it to make the next moment better.
Mm.
Jay, you really hit on something there with the traditions and the way a family does things, and so much of that we pick up even just by osmosis, and we find ourselves doing stuff with our kids that our parents did with us that we hated. Like, I'm yelling at my kids, and my mother yelled at me, and I promised myself I wouldn't be a yeller. But I think stopping in that moment and asking yourself, what would happen if I did this differently? What would happen if we didn't serve the turkey, in the way that you all serve? What would happen? Would the world come to an end?
Yeah, have a ham instead.
What do we have invested in that outcome? I mean, is it just that we feel comfortable with it? Is that we felt in childhood that when certain things happened in a certain way, all the world was right, and so we have to make them happen in a certain way, even though the world has changed, and that wouldn't make the world right anymore. But I think to ask yourself that actual question, what would happen if in this moment, I didn't yell at my kid? What would happen if I gave him a hug? What would happen if in this moment I didn't scold him over not doing his homework? What would happen if I asked him, why are you having trouble with this? Why, not in a nagging way, but hey, this is hard for you. Let's talk about this. Why is this so difficult for you to get this done? Making those choices, I think, it's so important, and asking that question can get us there.
Yeah, you really hit on something there, Thomas. I used to react a lot. We've talked about this a million times on the show, react as opposed to responding. And I think it's in that showing up in the moment that we, now we're able to choose how we want to respond to the situation instead of reacting. So being able to stop for that moment, create that space, like Eric was talking about earlier, we created a space here to get some of these thoughts and feelings out. But in those moments when I look back at my life a year ago, not even a year ago, because this is a practice, right? But when I started to implement these things a year ago, I noticed myself react. Shit, I just reacted. Okay, not to beat myself up, not to get down in that shame spiral, but to say, okay, how can I make sure that in the next moment that I'm aware, present, and able to choose a different choice? Yeah, something different this time as opposed to the way I just reacted. And then, and in that, being a parent, having that conversation with my son who's 14 and saying, you know what, buddy, I am sorry. Like, I screwed up, and I'm gonna do it again. Duck next time because I'm doing it again. No, but it's like I will mess up, and I'm just asking you to bear with me and hang in there because I'm working on me. If I can stand up, or if you as a parent out there watching or listening can stand up and say that to your kids, that you're sorry that you screwed up, just what you were talking about, Jay, setting that example. Isn't that weren't you talking about setting an example, or was that Eric? Either way,
on the show someplace.
You're showing up. You're setting the example of what you want your kids to see. You're being a mentor, but you're also being the coach, and it's just so much better of a pathway than anything else because you're taking that moment and choosing.
Yeah, I think the big thing that at least in my view of what happens in this, Chris, is that we show our kids that there are other ways to show up to the world when we do this. And we're starting to build their definition of how they move forward. And if we've carried some traditions that are really unproductive, we hated them when we were young. Why are we doing them? Well, most of the time we do them because they're so ingrained and we think we have to. Our beliefs are so deep about these things until you stop and notice that this isn't productive. So what would it take to stop and notice? And so to me, Thomas, that's exactly the question. What power do you have to stop this huge momentum of doing what you always do and consider something different? And I guess if there were one true message about what modern dads do, is they are aware enough to see it differently and choose something on purpose instead of default to what it is that we always do. And in that, I think what it shows us is that we're able to become who we need to be or want to be. That we have the power of ourselves, and the power of ourselves happens in the stop and notice. Because if you can freeze frame it for a second, instead of defaulting to what you always do, in that moment, things that were just a second ago not available to you are now available to you. It still takes a lot of work. It's a habit, but it's a habit that most of us don't have because we came packaged in the way we came packaged, and we've been riding along in whatever families taught us they taught us, and then we bring that. So the big question, I guess, is, and we ask this in the youth leadership program that we teach, who are you becoming? You don't have to be there. Just who are you in the process of becoming? Right. And how could our conversations help you become a bigger, better, more creative, more authentic, greater you? And in that, don't you know, or wouldn't you imagine that you could show up to the world as a different and better and bigger and more significant person. You can't help but be a better dad if you are also in the process of becoming a better you. Maybe, Chris, that's it. Maybe that's what this show's about, is how do we help dads become better dads? Just be better, authentic people. And as a dad, you can't help but show up better to your world that way.
So, yeah, it's really about helping dads be more authentic, right? I mean, that's... Go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. And, you know, one of the things that prevents us from responding and has us reacting instead is this idea of being triggered in some way. You know, a child says something or does something, and it triggers an emotional response, or emotional reaction, rather, in us. And then we get sort of swamped by that, and that starts a pattern. You know, your kid hasn't done his homework for whatever reason, that triggers you into some kind of reaction, and then, I mean, it's like you do the dance. You know, we've all done the dance, whether it's the homework dance, the bedtime dance, whatever it is, and it goes on and it repeats itself over and over. So the way to try to break that pattern is to pause in that moment and say, wait a minute, I'm being triggered. I'm being induced to have a certain reaction to this, and I need to know whether that reaction serves me well or not. You know, so just saying to the kid, you know, well, go to bed now, or I'm going to close your door and turn the light off and light. Is that really serving anyone in that moment? No, it's alienating you from your kid. It's making you into the bad guy. You know, and it's creating something that's really unpleasant. So stopping and saying, okay, this is what I want to do, but this isn't really what I want. You know, you can't see me here. I'm putting my hand over my heart. This isn't really what I want to do.
Right.
Right.
There's something that, and we just stumbled on this. Thomas, see what you think about this. We teach the present parent course. One of the things that's the best thing, I think, of showing up aware in the moment, besides the fact that you actually show up in the moment, you know, so there's some benefits if you could stop and notice. And these are the 3 benefits, and it just floored me the moment I found these. One was, in this moment, you have information that you didn't have before. So when you're busy reacting, instead of stopping and noticing, you miss out on how somebody looks, how somebody feels, some extra data, some detail that could change what's going on here. You miss it. The second thing that happens is you miss any opportunity for a creative response. You go for your go-to. So you don't stop and think about all of the other options that you could have. So you gathered information, and then you got to be creative if you could stop. And here's the big one. There's even a third one. And the third one to me is you can manage your energy. You choose how you show up to this. So you can have a kid who's having a meltdown, and you don't have to have one. Yes, maybe you always did, but you don't have to. In the moment, you can look at the situation, stop, notice. I got a kid who's really upset. Okay, so now I'm fact-finding. Why? What's going on here? 2, let me tap in deep to all my experiences to see if there's some creative response we might be able to do in this. And 3rd, I am not going to get mad over this. That's my choice. I don't have to. And in that, I think, to me, it was revelatory when I saw that. If you could stop. You know, and everybody says the power of now is that you get to live in the moment. I love that. Cool. But what if there's more to it? And the more is you get to manage, you get to gather information, use your creativity, and manage your emotions. You could do that if you showed up.
Right.
Well, how do you show up? Well, you got to stop and notice. And if we could develop that one habit, then I think virtually all the things that make us nutty dads, crazy dads, we would shift our paradigm and say, no, we're sound, rational, logical people who can be, you know, whatever we need to be in this moment. And if yelling is the right thing, then we chose it. It didn't fall out of us. We chose it. And if being kind and listening and not getting all upset by someone who's having a temper tantrum, I've seen this on the plane. I've seen both types of parents. One who gets madder at the kid, the madder they get in an airport, dragging them along, spanking them in front of everybody. Brilliant. Now you're all a mess. Or that one parent who is watching the meltdown, gently talking to them, staying calm with them. Little by little, they calm themselves down, and it's over. And I've seen people almost give the parent a standing ovation for managing this wild, outrageous Target kid or Walmart kid or airport kid. That all that happened was the parent said, I have a choice here. And the parents in the room or in the area, you will know. You can totally feel what this feels like. But I'm not going to default to my Italian temper that says, I'm going to pull your pants down and give you a spanking right here. I heard that one, and I got that one when I was a kid. I wouldn't even think of doing that now. But there's a couple of other Italian things I probably would do. But the ability to stop and notice and then just say, no, here's how I need it to be. Here's how it's going to be for me. I can do this. That little 1 second thing can shift us out of conventional dadism into modern dadism. I think, anyway. I'll be quiet now.
No, that was good. All right, and so Eric, I know you dropped off for a little bit, but did you want to add any last-minute thoughts on today's show?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like there's two things that came up. You know, one is this week, and the other is in this conversation. And you know, this week I did a lot of reviewing of lots of different reasons that violence happens. So, you know, in growing the game changer movement, and the one thing that showed up in my looking at this is that it was a quote from Tony Robbins, and he basically said, one of our drives is significance, is to feel significant. And he mentioned in his TED Talk that one of the easiest ways nowadays to feel significant is through violence. And so, like, that's why, you know, violent video games are so compelling to these kids, is that in those moments they're so significant, you know, because as Tony Robbins puts it, like, there's no more significant point in your life, your hand pointing at someone else's head. You know, that is true, the epitome of significance. So I believe that our job as parents is to help our kids feel significant in ways that don't have violence as an answer. And I feel like the other thing is, you know, how do we do that? Because I think, you know, much like Jay was saying, like, we are in, you know, generation upon generation of, you know, of the Italian way or the Lehman way or whatever way, which may have involved a public spanking. You know, and I feel like the challenge is, like, you know, the one habit I want to be about and I want to show my kids is that I can breathe once or twice before making any judgment call, or, you know, maybe going from judgment to discernment, you know, and like, I think it takes a few breaths in essence to go from judgment to discernment. And I feel like that's the transition, you know, and I think that's how we go from traditional to modern dads, is to figure out, I think it's the big thing, is to go from judgment to discernment. So, I mean, that's what's kind of it's my takeaway, and I'm really excited, and I'm glad we had this conversation for however much of it I could hear. The technology.
Yeah, well, that's technology, right? I mean, it's a beautiful part about. I mean, shoot, you're in New York. We got Jay down in Fort Lauderdale and Thomas in Maine, right? And so, and I'm in Michigan. I mean, we're really spread out around the East Coast over here. So that's another thing that I think is really awesome about the Modern Dad Council, is the fact that we aren't, you know, four buddies that are hanging out. We're four complete strangers from all parts of the country that have come together because of the thing that we're passionate about. And I think one of you, Jay or Thomas, had said that earlier, is that we're all here because, you know, our passion lies right under here in the dad category,
Right.
or being a man, being the Good Men Project, because men are dads, or dads are men. Yeah, whatever. Well, at any rate.
thought it was
Yes.
just our job to keep our kids off the pole.
Right. Well, that too. I don't know. I don't know what I'd think if my son danced on a pole.
Be open.
Well,
Yeah, he's good
I
at it.
think I would think we would learn to love him first, and then go from judgment to discernment. That's I think what we would do.
That's exactly right. So, this week's. Is there a last minute before I close the show, Jay or Thomas? Is there any last minute words that you guys want to say, or anything that you want to get out before we wrap up?
Thomas, go ahead, and then I'll fill in. Or are you
If
good?
not-
Well, just I guess first of all, for all of those who are watching this, thank you for being here with us and engaging with us, and just to emphasize that the modern dad is a work in progress. There is no one answer, and what we're saying today may be different next week or next month or next year because we're constantly learning. So that is what part of being a modern dad is about too, is learning and being open to new ways of doing things and new knowledge that can make us better fathers and better men.
I
Wow.
have nothing to top that. That's I'll leave it at that. I got a question about what another show might be, because I love what Eric said about significance. I think that's a great show. Is how do we help our kids be significant? I think that would be terrific.
Mm.
So, but otherwise, Thomas, great comments that that this is a reminder that we are human and therefore it's not perfect, and there isn't a one way to do any of this. There's lots of ways, but if you stop and notice, you'll figure out your way. And if you get better at stopping and notice, you'll see you have more choices, and you have greater ability to control your emotions. And I think that would be a huge lesson to show that dads are not the irascible, take your belt off, you're going to get a spanking kind of people. And nor are they the gentle kumbaya or hovering parent that says, let me just buy you your Range Rover. That there's some place in between that about being fully accountable, living your significance, and showing up big to your life. And I think the best way to do that is that we must do that for ourselves first.
I love it. One of the things that really stuck out for me is this idea of detached involvement. Is how do we be involved parents in our modern society? How do we be involved with our kids but yet be detached at the same time? I think that was a really neat thing that, Jay, I think it was you that hit on that. It's not our job to manage our kids' outcome. It's just to help guide our kids and to be that guide. So who are we here at the Modern Dad Council? We are here to help be other dads' guides to showing up in an authentic way to their kids' lives and to be as impactful as possible with that detached involvement. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.